You must gather your party before venturing forth.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes, and in today's video we're going to look at making a player character, or PC, for the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. Specifically, we're going to be making a 5th edition character, and I'm going to explain every single thing you need to do and talk you through the whole process step by step. So let's go. In order to follow along with this tutorial, you'll need a few things. You will need a blank character sheet. If you have access to the 5th edition Player's Handbook, there is a character sheet in the back that you can simply scan and print off. If you don't have access to the handbook, you can find many copies of the character sheet online. You will also need some 6-sided dice. If you have access to these, great. If you don't have any, you can find a dice rolling program online or an app on your phone. When playing Dungeons and Dragons as a character, all your information is recorded on your character sheet. This sheet will contain everything from your character's name, background, alignment, to their physical and mental attributes, all the way down to their inventory and what they're carrying. Now, it can be an intimidating document, especially if you've never filled one in before. So I'm going to go through with you step by step and explain every single part and how you fill it in. For now, we're only going to focus on the top part of this sheet. Number 1, character name. If you already have a name in mind, fantastic. If you don't, and this is actually better, don't think of it until the end. Let's get the whole process of creating this character first, and then think of a name at the very, very final step. That way, if a name just comes to you while you're creating, even better. It's a natural process. Allow it to evolve. Don't stare at that name and think, I have to come up with a name first. If anything, come up with a name last. Allow it to evolve naturally and be discovered over time. Don't worry too much about the character name. We will be coming back to that. Class and level. Don't worry too much about the level. That number will be 1. It will always be 1 when creating a new character, unless you've agreed with your DM beforehand. But for now, that's going to stay as 1. Class. Let's talk about class. If you've played any role-playing game before, like Skyrim or any Dungeons and Dragons game, you'll know exactly what class is. Broadly speaking, it is how would your character handle combat. This doesn't necessarily mean your character is definitely going to get into combat. That depends on what kind of game you're running. But if you did, how would your character handle it? Would they pull out a sword and fight back melee style? Would they start throwing spells? Would they sneak into the shadows and disappear to not be seen? Or would they try and charm their way out? Their combat style is defined by their class, and their class is defined by their combat style. The two are inherently linked. Let's explain every class available to you in 5th edition, and when you hear one you like, write that down. The classes available are Barbarian, a fierce, up-close warrior who can enter a primal rage and do tons of damage with massive weapons. The Bard, an extravagant performer whose actions can inspire allies and demoralize enemies. Cleric, a priestly champion of the gods who can wield divine magic. Druid, a priest of the old ways, able to communicate with nature and in some cases shapeshift into other animals. Fighter, a master of combat, skilled in many martial arts and many weapon styles. Monk, a martial arts master, focusing their energy and using all their concentration to strike with deadly force, either unarmed or with the simplest of weapons. Paladin, a warrior of truth and justice, often following a single god, wearing heavy armor and using fantastic weapons to smite down evildoers. Ranger, a skilled tracker and bow user, friend of the wild with access to basic nature magic. Rogue, a scoundrel who lives on the edge of the law, using trickery and subterfuge to overcome all of their problems and take what often doesn't belong to them. The Sorcerer, a spellcaster who relies on the natural magical ability they were born with. They've never studied or worked hard. They were just good at magic from a young age. Warlock, a magic user who was neither born with magical powers nor studied to achieve them. Instead, they made a deal or a pact with a devil, a demon, or an archfiend. They have access to magical powers, but they also owe a terrible, terrible debt to something very, very powerful. Wizard, a magic user who has studied for years and years to build up their magical knowledge and now has control of powerful arcane forces. Those are all the classes that come as standard with the 5th edition Player's Handbook. Now there are more classes for Dungeons & Dragons, either found in supplementary Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition books, older edition rulebooks, or made by players that you can find online, although some of those may be a bit unbalanced. Find a class that you like the look of playing and then write that down. Once you've decided on your class, it's time to pick a race. Dungeons & Dragons exists in a fantasy world, so of course contains all the fantasy races you've probably heard of before. Humans, orcs, elves, goblins, but it also contains a few you may not have heard of, tieflings or the snake-like Yuan-Ti. Now choosing a race will never ever give you a negative bonus. It will only ever give you a positive bonus. Choose a race that you like the look of or that you would enjoy playing. For example, choosing an elf may give you access to dark vision, allowing you to see in the dark or through dark caves. Choosing an orc may make you more powerful physically, better with close-up melee weapons. Don't worry too much about building your character to be overpowered, build them to be interesting. The races that you could pick include dwarves, short, hardy and tough, often found under the ground, mining or smithing. They are skilled artisans, excellent with battle axes and slightly more resistant to being poisoned than any other race. Elves, beautiful and almost ageless. Elves can live for between 700 to 1,000 years. There are various types of elves. High elves, wood elves, or the dark elves, commonly known as the drow. Halflings, slightly shorter than dwarves, standing at around 3 feet. The best modern example of a halfling would be a hobbit. They prefer the quiet and the sanctity of home to the adventure and danger of the wide open road, but occasionally a halfling will have that wanderlust, that desire to go beyond their village and see what's out there. Humans. Humans are one of the dominant races in Dungeons & Dragons. They can excel in absolutely anything and they are everyone's friend, but they are also everyone's enemy. Humans have long not picked a side in many racial battles, and so there's a lot of tension between humans and every other race. Dragonborn, the humanoid-shaped offspring of dragons. Dragonborns can have scaly skin and intimidating draconic visage faces. They strike both fear and intrigue wherever they go, and depending on the colour of Dragonborn you wish to play, you'll gain access to a powerful breath weapon. Gnomes. Gnomes are as short as halflings, but much more energetic. They're known as the tinkerers and the designers of the world. They build things out of scrap metal, creating either huge cities or tiny intricate watches. Gnomes are fantastic craftsmen and are able to create almost anything from almost anything. Half-elf. A child of a human parent and an elf parent. They have traits of both of the worlds, the dark vision of the elves, but the intelligence and tenacity of the humans. They're able to get on and span that gap across both worlds, although neither race will entirely trust them. Half-orc. Child of a human parent and an orc parent. They have the strength, the power and the destructive force of an orc combined with the intelligent brain of a human. This means they can be incredibly dangerous in close combat as they are both cunning and vicious. Unfortunately, orcs will never fully accept them because of their human heritage, and humans can often be scared or intimidated by them. tiefling, a humanoid-shaped body with a tail and facial growths such as horns or protrusions. They were originally descended from humans, but mixed with an infernal bloodline many years ago, leading to a natural affinity for magic. They make excellent wizards, but many humans do not trust them at all. Once you have decided on a race you like the sound of, write it down on your character sheet, and now let's move on to background. This is the end of Making a Character Part 1. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. In the next part, we'll carry on with background, and I will explain alignment. If you have any questions so far, please leave a comment down below or join me live nightly on Twitch at twitch.tv/Josh Strife Hayes. And as always, gather your party and venture forth.